Hi there. Oh God, I'm just pleased because I finally got hold of some footage from Talk Radio that on the day after Lucy was convicted, I called in and on the show, the Saturday show, and spoke to, I think it's the Dr. Bull and Rene Hoenderkampf about, I thought that it was a miscarriage of justice, Lucy Letby, and I've got it now. So I'm gonna put some of that show on so you can hear. And I'm under the name Tonya because I didn't use my real name when I called into Talk Radio. I use the name Tonya, but you can hear that it's me, and then by my voice. And later on in that show is when Mark McDonald called in later. And I've put clips from the show because it's a bit interesting actually to hear how they were talking about her then. So here's the footage, 19th of August 2023, Saturday 19th of August, the day after Lucy was convicted and just before she was sentenced on the first conviction.
Action earlier, if they'd intervened and taken her off the wards, babies would be alive.
Exactly. So I don't think we'll ever get rid of these psychopaths, ever, because they're here.
Of course we won't.
But we could stop them doing their worst.
And very quickly, some of the babies were killed by the hospital. They made the whistle-blowing doctors apologise to Letby and allowed her to continue. They have to take responsibility. She must appear in court and she must be sentenced to life in prison in the absence of the death penalty. That's Sylvia Anderson. Thank you very much indeed for those. Let's take some calls. Tonya's in Devon. Good morning to you.
This is me next.
Hi there.
Hi.
Good morning.
What are your thoughts this morning on the Lucy Letby case?
My thoughts, I mean, I've been following it since the beginning because I just found it a bit suspicious. But I don't think she's guilty. I think she's been made a scapegoat.
You don't think she's
guilty?
Hang on a minute.
No,
Hang on a minute. You don't think she's guilty?
No, I think she's a scapegoat for appalling incompetence of a hospital. These were very sick babies with many, many issues. We're not hearing, of course, the other side, the experts for the defence, who've shown that these babies weren't necessarily murdered. They could have died from natural causes and from appalling incompetence as well. She may well be guilty of very, very severe incompetence, along with many other.
But these babies also, if I'm right in this, and Dr. Rene will back me up, these babies got air emboluses, air emboli. That is caused by injecting air into a vein. That does not happen spontaneously.
Yeah, I mean the medical expert on the side of Lucy Letby explained how there could be other reasons for those deaths. Okay, so I'm not going to claim I'm a medical expert. I'm just going on what I've read of this case. I mean, we're only seeing one side of it. And I would say the hospital management, the NHS always cover up and lie. The minute anything, I've made complaints against them, they've made up awful lies about me. I know how they work. Consultants are not good, nice, honest people. They lie too.
One of the
consultants has been caught lying in court. He lied about that he was the one that switched the machine off when it was blamed on her, and he was caught to be the one. He lied about that in court. Why isn't he held accountable for lying in court?
Okay, so I think, Tonya...
Hang on, let's ask Dr. Rene.
Yeah, Tonya, I think these things will come out in the inquiries, and I hope that they do. I think you're absolutely right.
Later? Well, when she's been in prison for 10 years.
Let me just finish. The other reason, 2 of these babies died because they'd been injected with massive doses of insulin. That doesn't happen just spontaneously. Somebody has to physically do that.
That was contested by the defence expert.
Well, it would be.
That wasn't.
Well, it will be contested, but the thing is, there was evidence to say insulin had been injected into these babies.
Yeah, but there was also, that was not the clear, according to the defence expert witness, that was not the clear cause of death. And that's what I'm saying, this was an appalling, incompetent hospital. They're covering up...
Well, also, let me just pick you up on that. You know, when you said that all hospitals lie, I have to be very clear that actually the vast majority... Well, hang on a minute. The vast majority of staff in hospitals are there to look after their patients. Hang on a minute. The vast majority of people, including clinicians and the management, are there to make sure that the patients get a really good treatment.
partner, yeah.
No, they are there to provide treatment. And the reason I went into medicine and Rene went into medicine is because we cared about people and we care about people.
Angels and perfect, yeah, I get that. But,
it's really important we have this balance.
You know what I think, David, about this? I think on this day, where there are parents grieving for their lost babies, I think this conversation is totally inappropriate, and it will come out in the inquiry. That's what I think.
Cancel me. I think you'll find in years to come it'll be a miscarriage of justice, like many other miscarriage of justice in this country, and a cover-up.
Tonya.
Cancel me, though. Go. Bye.
No, you're entitled to your opinion, Tonya, and thank you very much indeed for contacting us this morning. I just want to just go through some of those because the evidence is really compelling when you look at it. And this is from pathologists as well. Yep. So having rash and discoloration, air embolus. So we have to go on the evidence here, and I just want to, and it's fine to have a difference.
As the jury did for 4 weeks.
As the jury did. And so I have all of the cases in front of me. Child O, Child P. Child O suffered from an air embolus. Child P, air embolus. I've got this one, the child D, air embolus, rash discoloration, same rash, same discoloration, insulin injections. So this is evidence that was presented in court and the jury decided that she was guilty.
I just think it's disrespectful on this day to the parents, to the police, to everybody who sat through this for 10 months. I think these things may come up about other things that were wrong on the ward, and I'm not saying there weren't other things wrong on the ward. Of course there possibly were. But I don't think today, of all days, when parents are now sitting thinking, my goodness, what if I'd have done X, Y and Z, that it is respectful to those parents. And you know what? It doesn't matter what case we go back on in history. There will be people who think Harold Shipman didn't do it. There will be people who think Myra Hindley didn't do it.
And you're entitled to your opinion.
Exactly.
Let's move on. Let's talk to Phil in Hertfordshire. Good morning.
Good morning, doctors.
Morning.
I was actually sort of open mouth listening to your previous caller. I think she belongs in Broadmoor. I think, like Beverly Howard, I think that's where she went.
I mean, we talked about that as well, the parallels with Beverly Alice again. Those deaths were caused by air emboli, also by injection of insulin. And I wonder if there was an element of copycat killing. That was back in 1993. Ian, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian.
Indeed, for your call. Matthew is in Devon. Good morning.
Hello.
Morning.
Yes,
Hi.
I'm Matthew. I just watched that last caller come on, not the last one, but one of the first ones.
Tonya.
She said that she didn't believe Lucy Letby was guilty. I've spent 32 years in prison, and I've been through the justice system many times. I've been in and out for drug use, and because I've also done 2.5 years in prison for a crime that never even happened and that I never did, I also came to the same conclusion. I haven't seen any of the evidence. I don't know anything really much about the Lucy Letby case. But being in prison with a lot of innocent people, I also, at the moment, shake my head and wonder if she really is guilty. Because once the evidence snowball starts running with the police, everything just becomes against that person, and it's so easy these days to make a miscarriage of justice.
OK, I'm sorry to hear that you were imprisoned for something you didn't do, but you said you haven't seen any of the evidence in this particular case. There was a huge amount of evidence. The jury, 12 of them, sat there wading through all this evidence. Sue in Cardiff says the managers should be hung out to dry. They should have listened to the experts. That is the fact the consultant paediatrician said something was wrong and needed to be done. Letby should be hanged. The death penalty needs to be reintroduced.
See, I don't agree with that.
No, because we have seen miscarriages of justice.
Yeah.
Talking earlier, weren't we, about Dr. Ravi? And he's issued a statement on social media, hasn't he? Which I think you've got in front of you.
I do.
And it's very strong.
It's very strong, it's very moving. I mean, I picked out to you the paragraph that says there are bad people in all walks of life and many of them are very good at hiding in plain sight.
Oh, does that sound a bit close to home, Ravi?
Also people in highly paid positions of responsibility in healthcare whose job it is to ensure patient safety. I mean, look, I would imagine that they were probably short-staffed, so that also plays into it, and it does.
But it also goes back to when they said, well, a lovely nurse Letby, didn't they? They said, well, and in fact, and actually there was another thing that I read about. The fact is that another baby was in severe distress, and it became a running joke almost, and they said, is Lucy on on duty.
Yeah, that to me is absolutely abhorrent. I cannot believe that would even happen. This is a baby, a human being with their whole life in front of them.
Well, yeah, Rene, but you just dismissed me then when I was trying to tell you what NHS can be like.
I mean, you and I both said at the same time when we were talking earlier that she's a psychopath.
Yeah. She's a psychopath, and that's just a personality trait. That's not, that's the way that she has developed for whatever reasons, who knows. But for her to then be almost rewarded for that by having a much nicer prison life than she will if she goes into a normal prison, I'm afraid I don't think it warrants that. It's not scoffing.
She was talking there about previous suggestion by a caller that Lucy should have been Broadmoor, I think.
I don't think that we should put everything that happens by evil people under the umbrella of mental health.
But she must have known what she was doing. Well, she did know what she was doing because she wrote it down.
She was competent. She was going to work every day. She was running her life like a normal person, going to parties, going on holiday, going
posing
to work.
Posing in social media photographs.
And killing babies.
More of you saying that she should be hanged. The death penalty needs to be reintroduced, says Ian again. People very strong on that.
I know. I can't sanction the killing of innocent people, which is what will happen.
Yeah. Lucy Letby's an innocent person too.
Any other messages coming in? I just have to be quite careful about this. This is about a particular incident at a particular hospital. Talking about medical negligence. I won't read it out because I can't, but I share your pain. And having been through that, where I have been involved in a case of medical negligence, I was absolutely appalled. And I sat at the inquest into my cousin's death, and it was a catalogue of failure.
It always is a catalogue of failures.
But what I couldn't get my head around was that the junior doctors, not only had they changed the notes, they'd torn the notes out. So the notes went and disappeared, and they lied on oath.
Yeah, so I actually have a personal experience of this. So I once had quite a heated exchange with a senior nurse on a ward because I had prescribed a patient who really desperately needed it, fluids, very fast for quite a while. I went back about 5 hours later and she hadn't even had one bag set up. When I queried that, the nurse was very defensive, very rude, and it escalated. So I wrote in the notes what had happened and why the patient had not had fluids.
As you should.
When I went back the next day, that page had been taken from the notes. It was no longer there.
Which is not acceptable.
No.
And you can't do that. You can't meddle with patient notes. But you see, we all have these experiences.
Then there's an argument for electronic notes.
But again, I've seen this for myself. If I hadn't seen that case, if I hadn't seen what happened to my cousin, I wouldn't have believed that doctors could close ranks. But again...
Oh, yeah, they do close ranks, don't they? Yeah.
But again, it goes back to that whole thing, doesn't it, about not letting down the team. It's about actually making sure that you stand up for your institution, for your hospital. But at the end of the day, it's about the patients. Also, I think sometimes the junior doctors don't get the support they need as well.
No, of course. Look, there's lots of things here that go wrong. But we've seen doctors struck off because they have propositioned a nurse or a patient inappropriately. But here we've got a nurse killing babies. We need to focus our efforts, David, on the things that are important. We really do.
It's the time 9:24 now on Saturday, August the 19th. Let's return to our main story, that about Lucy Letby. The Daily Mail this morning says they had 10 chances to stop her. The Mirror says, how many more? And The Sun also talks about this changing character, hen party one day and a baby killer the next. The Times has a very pithy headline indeed, a cold, calculating killer. What on earth was the hospital doing, trying to manage this internally, and why didn't they call in the police? Joining us now is Mark MacDonald, a criminal barrister. Good morning to you.
Morning.
Good morning.
What are your thoughts on a very complicated, very emotional case?
It is a complicated, it is an emotional case, but it actually follows a long line of cases of convictions that have happened in this country and also internationally of nurses that have been convicted of harming patients, sometimes murdering them, sometimes causing serious harm. Many of those convictions have been found to be false, have been found to be miscarriages of justice, have been found that they were in fact innocent. The case of a Dutch nurse, De Burk, she was sentenced to life imprisonment for murdering 5 patients. It later came about that she was totally innocent and was exonerated. There's been 2
cases, previous cases, one of Ben Geen, one of Colin Norris, both nurses, both convicted of murdering patients, both now have strong evidence of innocence surrounding them. And this case mirrors all the cases that have gone before them. Remember, there is limited, if anything, any direct evidence against Lucy of harm to a patient, of drugs found in the system. Each one of the hypotheses that were put forward by the experts as to how this child or baby died was a theory. There was nothing found in the blood system. So let me take, for example...
Well, you wouldn't find anything if you had an air embolus.
Absolutely. Well, you couldn't find anything if there was an air embolism, but even more than that, each one was at the time a natural death. There was no post-mortem. There was no toxicology screening. So everything was done years later and put before a jury over months. Each time they pointed at that woman in the dock and said, she is responsible for the deaths of these precious childs. She murdered them. And they put in one after one after one of doctors and experts that said, well, in my view, this was not common. I haven't seen this before. No statistical analysis, no statistical basis, no discussion about clusters. And each one of them, and I go back to again, and it mirrors every single case that's come before it of a nurse that's been wrongly convicted of no direct evidence.
Are you saying that this is a miscarriage of justice then?
I'm saying that, well, first of all, let me be clear, I didn't sit through the months of the trial.
Indeed.
But having worked on these cases for the last 24 years, having seen the evidence that's gone before the juries, this seems to mirror every single case that's gone before it of a limited amount of evidence based upon anecdotal evidence, not anything statistically based, no toxicology screening, no post-mortem, nothing. And yet they have pointed a finger at this Goody Proctor sitting in the stand saying she was the witch that was on duty at the time that they died, therefore she must have been guilty. That's how she was convicted. And I think it's really concerning. And I've seen it over and over again. Now, I'm not some lefty lawyer that simply wants to bang on about people that are being innocent. I've been a criminal barrister for 27 years. I've prosecuted, I've defended, and I've done murder trials where plainly my client's been guilty. I'm not saying that there are not many guilty people out there, all right? What I'm saying is that there are real concerns by the nature of the evidence that have been put before the juries in these types of cases.
But of course, there were 22 counts. She wasn't found guilty of all of them, and in some ways many people have been actually saying that that shows that the jury listened intently, they made a decision on each of those charges. Also, as you rightly say, of course they had to piece this together. It was a painstaking piece of work by the police. When you read through all of these, and I have it in front of me, child A, child C and so on, there is a pattern that emerges. And of course they then looked at the rotors and then they worked out that this is in their minds, that they worked out that the common factor here was that Lucy Letby was on duty at this time. There are lots of other parts to this. For example, when she was on holiday, suddenly the babies got better. When she returned from Ibiza, a baby then died. Also then, how do you explain the notes, the fact she had handover notes taken home? She wrote those notes saying she's evil, she can't believe what she's done. That is not in common with those other cases.
Well, let me just unpack that, okay, because in fact it is. It's exactly in common. In each one of the nurse cases that have happened before this, the central core of the prosecution case is that there's a pattern, that they're on duty when a patient becomes more sick, that they're around. When they're not on duty, it doesn't happen. In fact, that is completely mirrors every single nurse case that's come before it. Now, I have statistical evidence. I've been to the leading statisticians in this country and internationally that have looked at each one of these nurses' cases and says there is no pattern. Because so for example, let me give you a classic example. I know it's complex and it's very hard to summarize this in a couple of minutes that we have. Well, let me give you an example of Ben Geen. Ben Geen was a nurse who worked at Horton General Hospital in Banbury. He was convicted of murdering 2 patients and causing respiratory arrest in following 18 patients. It was said that he had done it by either muscle relaxants, insulin, or indeed giving too much oxygen to one patient, or putting insulin into a drip bag. So what they did is because there was no postmortems, because there was no direct evidence, they got experts, generally an anaesthetist, to go into the witness box and say, well, in my view, this patient died or this patient had a respiratory arrest because of this, because of this. What they did is on the Friday, another doctor decided, same as in Lucy Letby, decided that there was something suspicious going on here. On the Friday, they called an inquiry. They called a panel of team in. Over the weekend, they decided, they looked at 18 patients' notes. On the Monday morning, 3 days later, they arrested the nurse. Do you know what? They only looked at the nurses, the patient's notes that this nurse had looked after. They didn't look at anyone else's notes. And they disregarded any unusual activity where this nurse was not on duty. And this happened in the Dutch nurse case, De Burg, where later, on a closer analysis, they found other patients when she was on holiday that had become sick. Now, I know you know about clusters, and that things do happen that are unusual, that you might get a whole series of deaths on a particular ward. I've worked in A&E, I've worked in the operating theatre for over 14 years. I've worked with doctors and anaesthetists and consultant surgeons who, you raise an eyebrow at their conduct, and you've got to keep an eye on them because they're not great. I've found doctors in toilets with their arms full of fentanyl that are asleep in a toilet during an operation, an anaesthetist. I've seen all this happen. And the fact is that there are problems in our National Health Service. There are things that go wrong, both with doctors and medical staff. But what we've got to be clear is in this case, with a failure of having direct evidence, with a failure of having statistical evidence, we've got a real concern.
I do have to just jump in, and I've let you talk because it's important.
Yes, you did.
But obviously, what we know is that these babies died between June 2015 and 2016. Concerns were raised by consultant paediatricians as early as October, so 3.5, 4 months later. They pieced it together. They believed that Lucy Letby was the common factor. They then escalated this to hospital management. Hospital management didn't call in the police till much later. Now, to be fair to the police, they then spent 2 years investigating this. The amount of evidence they went through is extraordinary, and then they decided to charge. Now, of course, as you know, because you're a criminal barrister, you have to prove beyond all reasonable doubt. You can't just have associations. So I find it really hard to believe that you're saying that she isn't guilty. And people are just messaging me here saying, Mr. McDonald is a typical defence lawyer. You're muddying the evidence to confuse the public. You have your own agenda, which is money and publicity. If you want to see narcissistic behaviour. Well, let me just read that. This is what people are saying. Many people are saying, where on earth did you come from, and why are you trying to muddy the evidence? This was found in a court of law, and she has been found guilty.
Let's just talk about miscarriage of justice. Each miscarriage of justice went before a jury.
Let's talk about Beverly Allett.
Well, we can talk about Beverly. We can always pick up a case where someone...
Well, you've just done exactly that. You've cherry-picked cases that suit your agenda, haven't you?
I'm talking about Colin Norris. I'm talking about Ben Geen. I'm talking about Lucy De Burg.
OK, I'm talking about Beverly Allett.
OK, you can talk about Beverly Allett. I'm talking about the Birmingham Six that went before...
Why don't we talk about Harold Shipman?
Not guilty.
What about Harold Shipman?
Well, what about Howard Shipman?
Well, Harold Shipman was guilty. Let me bring in Dr. Rene.
You can't just bring in Howard Shipman and say, Howard Shipman was guilty, therefore...
Let me bring in Howard Shipman. Let me bring in Howard Shipman. Most of the evidence against Howard Shipman was exactly as you say. It was by association. He was there. These people died. He was the common theme. What we're forgetting here is that this woman had evidence in her home. She took home baby notes. That is sacrosanct. I have never taken home a baby note in my life. But also, she wrote notes in her own home, hundreds of them, saying, I did this, I killed them.
It was one note, actually, that was referred to where she said, I'm evil. Let's not exaggerate the evidence that was there put before the jury, all right? So, I mean, an alternative explanation could be that she was guilt-ridden of these children, which is what she actually said in her journals and her diary and to her friends. She was guilt-ridden, and the text messages and the exchanges, which I'm sure you've read, where she was guilt-ridden about these children dying on her watch. And she said, I am evil in the context of that. Now, you don't find someone guilty of murder because of a text message.
Also, you do not find people guilty. The jury have been there. They've been sitting through all of this evidence, and they have made that decision.
And they may have got it wrong.
Yeah.
You are entitled to that opinion. Just in terms of... We are obviously going to disagree on this, but just in terms of what happens next, the sentencing is believed to be on Monday.
Yes.
What happens next?
He'll probably get between 30 and 35 years. He may get a whole life sentence. I don't know. That's become quite popular at the moment to give whole life sentences out. Unlikely that she will. It's more likely that she'll get 30 to 35 years tariff. So she gets life imprisonment. So the way the system works, anyone who's convicted of murder automatically gets life imprisonment. And then they set a tariff for when you can apply for a parole. And so for murder, it's generally between 20 and 40 years, depending upon the nature of the murder. So if it's a gunshot or whatever. So in previous cases of this type, it's been 30 to 35 years before she can apply for parole. Where we talk about a whole life tariff, that means she can never apply for parole.
And can I just ask you, though, in terms of the full indictment, so as I said, there were 22 charges. There were some where the jury couldn't agree whether she was guilty or not. So what happens with regards to that? Will they push for some sort of retrial?
No. To have a retrial, it's got to really be within the public interest. They may take the view that there's evidence there to convict and they could retry on, but they won't retry her when they've got her on the main counts, i.e. she's going to get 30 years. She's not going to get any extra sentence by these extra counts. So that will stop. If, for example, they couldn't come back to a verdict, then they might retry. But also, if memory serves me right, she was found not guilty. And when you're found not guilty of a crime, you can't retry them for the crime because you don't agree with the jury's verdict.
Mark, very good of you to join us. Thank you very much indeed. That's Mark MacDonald, a criminal barrister.
I just want to correct one thing.
Please do.
A series of notes were found in her home,
Well
not
done.
just one note.
Well, I thought that was wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, lots of people are messaging in. This one from Phil. I'm a retired prison officer with 22 years service. The judges used to insist that trial prisoners attend court and dock. We often used to have to restrain prisoners and take them to the dock on the judge's orders. This should happen to this monster. Face the families before being sent down for 30 years. I would come out of retirement. I would do it myself. Lots of other messages. I love the show, Doctors, as you know. The judge and jury should be left to the legal system, and that's the point I was trying to make. I find it extraordinary that Mark is trying to draw parallels with
Especially
cases.
so early. I think, you know, we need the parents to have
the
time
point I was trying to make was he was cherry-picking cases to support his argument.
Yeah.
When I cherry-pick cases
weren't
to
allowed.
support my cases, I wasn't allowed.
No, and in one of those notes that she'd written, she actually wrote, I don't deserve to live. I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough to care for them. I am a horrible, evil person. You know, these are very odd notes. However you want to look at it, they're very odd notes.
They are very odd
You know,
notes.
maybe they're notes of somebody who is suffering from a mental disorder, I don't know. But you know what? I just think today we ought to have enough respect for the parents of these children to let it sit. And of course there have been miscarriages of justice, which is why I would never support the death penalty. But on this case alone, today is the day after parents learned that their babies were murdered by this woman. Can we please let them grieve?
And just one on whistleblowing. Lynn says, I know of whistleblower who can no longer work for the NHS.
Yeah.
They're trying to say she has mental health issues. They band together to stop people knowing what's going on. Loads of messages coming in. I do have to just read a couple. Hi, David and Rene. I actually found what Mark was saying. This is Mark, the criminal barrister, Mark MacDonald. I found it really interesting. And miscarriages of justice does need a discussion because the direct evidence of her being guilty is subjective and speculative. Whilst the court has found her guilty, if she's innocent, then only she will have to fight for it and bring it to light. Thank you very much indeed. David, don't forget to challenge consensus, an interesting discussion with the barrister. Another completely different point of view. Mark, the barrister, is undermining the case against the baby murderer, makes me feel sick and angry. He's adding to all the conspiracy theorists out there. Some people always have to be contrary. He is disrespecting the memory of the babies. Very strong opinions indeed.
I also think it's really unusual for us, the day after such a momentous verdict, to be questioning it. Surely time has to, you know, pass while if she has a case, she puts it forward.
Well, that's exactly the point, Rene. Think about it. Why do you think people are questioning it the day after? Because there was no direct evidence. It was just fabrication.
Of course, the sentencing will take place on Monday.
I've just got back from 19 Nurses as well, but they put footage of that on their thing. I got back from the other day from the 19 Nurses thing in London, and they put it on there because we couldn't film in there, but they filmed it on their website. But I did take some notes. I might put something together from the notes about that later. Thanks.